So hello, I think we can probably get away with saying Happy New Year. It's 10th of January. I'm Ben Fraser. I'm the insurance industry vertical lead at Endava. And this is the first Insurance Assessed episode of 2022. We had our first one at the back end of last year. We talked a bit about automation. And really it's just a brief podcast to help provide some insights into some of the issues that are facing insurers, our clients and people we're talking to, just around exploring sort of latest innovations, trying to help people think about what's happening in the market. We've got a bunch of these that we're doing. We're talking about self-service. We've got something about low code, no code coming up. But today we're very much in the space of talking about data-driven insurance. And my co-host today is Dan Robinson. Dan's a delivery partner within our insurance team. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ben. So my name is Dan Robinson. I have recently joined Endava, been here coming up for a year now. My background is the last 20 or so years in insurance and financial services, both in the transformation and change side, but also running products and businesses. This opportunity has given me the opportunity to blend both delivery and I think that customer focused attitude that comes from a more kind of business P&L focused role.
Excellent, thanks, mate. So let's get into the topic at hand. So data-driven insurance, and Dan, we hear a lot about it, don't we? Everyone talks about, I guess, the deluge of data within the insurance industry and how we should use that efficiently and effectively. But data within insurance and use of data to price risk is not a new thing, right? I mean, actuaries have been around since kind of forever. So what in your view, what do we think it actually means to be data-driven? What's changed or changing in that space?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. An actuary hasn't got a great deal to do without some data. I think one of the things that really is changing though is that I think there's a proper recognition now that actually data is really what we call a lifeblood of an insurance company. Yeah. And actually, without having command of that data, it's very difficult to provide the brilliant customer service that is now required to meet customer expectations. It is genuinely the fuel for commercial success as well as customer success, and I think there's a real recognition of that now. And I think what's happened, in the last kind of 10 years or so is this kind of whole concept of big data has also come into the insurance landscape and the broader landscape. And that's the use of external data. It's obviously the huge swathes of data that come from social media, and being able to use that, bring that together and drive value from it is I think really transforming the way insurers now behave. So yeah, I guess to summarize that, yes, insurers have always been data driven in a sense. I think the data that we're now looking at is a little bit different to the pure kind of underwriting focused view, and it's very much about meeting customer expectations.
Interesting. Okay, and so we unpack that a little bit. So what would you perhaps say are some of the main trends or the key trend around that we're seeing in the insurance industry where data is sort of helping to shape it effectively?
Yeah, so I think there's I've got three favorites, which I call the 3 Ps. So I think personalization is huge. I think there's a big emphasis now on insurers moving from reacting to claims after the event to trying to prevent them. And part of that is the ability to predict when these things are going to happen. So if I pick on personalization, for example, I think insurers have got a long track record of asking customers for the same data multiple times. Yeah. If you get a home insurance quote, and if you buy that product, you then get a car insurance product cross-sold to you. A lot of the time, the customer, even though they're an existing customer, is going through the same set of basic questions again. I think the days when an insurer can get away with that are done. Instead, I think the personalization of customer experiences as well as products is now really coming to the fore. So a simple example: if I'm doing a quote for a Ford Galaxy, for example, car insurance quote, and yet you're showing me pictures of a small family hatchback through that quote journey. Doesn't feel like that's very personalised.
Not feeling the confidence either, does it?
Yeah, you've got my reg. You should be able to show me my car. You know where I live. You should be able to, in a home quote, for example, you should be able to show me my house. We've got the Google image of that. Why are you asking me questions which actually you can already get from elsewhere? Now, I guess one of the challenges of that, and I've certainly been in conversations where there's almost a fear of being creepy. That's getting all of this external data and providing a slightly freaky experience for the customer because they don't get where that comes from. I think that's I think those days are long gone, and I think providing the customer experience is clear that that data is being used and where it's coming from, for example, it's perfectly sensible to do that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was one of your 3 Ps, personalization, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Personalization, prevention. I touched on. So I think the idea is that if insurers change their way of thinking from being about responding to something bad that's happened to preventing something bad happening, whether that be warning about poor driving behavior via a telematics capability, or whether that be being able to predict when a flood is happening or will happen to a customer, and there's a greater risk there. I think that preventative focus through prediction and through the ability to recognize risks early is a really positive movement in the way an insurer thinks. Probably the easiest example, Ben, is car insurance telematics. So obviously, where we as Endava are working with one of the bigger UK insurers in that space, and we've built a car telematics app that replaces the need for a black box. So there's a customer benefit there and a business benefit in that it's easier. It's easier to kind of get the device working. There's not a fitting process. But actually, what's really important in that experience is that it's been done in a way that it's fun and rewarding. But the data is from one angle a data play. The data is hugely rich, and it absolutely does allow those kind of those warnings, those preemptive warnings, to be made if that's what needs to happen.
And in that instance, it's using telematics capability from the phone, right, rather than perhaps more granular telematics capability from a black box.
Yeah, absolutely. But smartphones are developing pretty quickly. The kind of data that can now be generated from a smartphone is pretty immense. And I think that is the direction of travel in many ways for telematics.
Absolutely, and then I think one of the really interesting things we see in that is the contextualization of that data, right? So, I'm not advocating speeding, but it does feel to me like there's a difference between doing 38 in a 30 at 11 o'clock in the morning with no one else around versus doing the same, going past the school at kicking out time sort of thing. So the contextualization of that data is also important from a risk perspective as well.
Yeah, I think absolutely right, and that's a great example. And what I've seen in a past life, genuinely brought to life. I think that one of the challenges with having all that data is actually you can't unknow something that you know. So if you know a driver is speeding past a school, as per the example that you gave there, then I feel that there is an ethical need to do something about that, because at that point in time that there are school kids outside that school, and the driver is, let's say they're doing 40 or 50 miles an hour past that is genuinely dangerous behavior as well as breaking the law. There's an ethical need to do something about that, and that is one of the challenges. You can't unknow what you know, and therefore there's an ethical need to react.
Interesting. And I guess just touching on what you were talking about in terms of the sort of preventative aspects of some of this stuff, I guess not an Endava client, but perhaps the best example of that we see in the market is what Vitality have been doing for a little while, where they're kind of gamifying good behaviour. They're dishing out I think sort of smartwatches and allowing people to track exercise and that type of thing, which ultimately reduces their health insurance risk profile, which I think is yeah, it's been around a while, but it's still a really, really great example and probably the shining light in the industry, I guess. Would you agree with that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great example. I think the genius of the proposition, it really taps into the psychology of human behavior. So, so I'm a runner. I love to run when I'm not injured. And I've got all of the gadgets. I've got the Garmin. I hook into Strava. All of my connections can see what I'm doing. But it's one of those things where the ability to see that, to capture it, to look at it, becomes really important to you. And I think Vitality have done a great job of not only having a great proposition in that you get something cool free like an Apple Watch, for example, but actually in understanding that tracking and visualizing that data regularly becomes a really important part of the customer experience. I think how many insurers can genuinely say that a large proportion of their customers are interacting with them on a daily or weekly basis and getting some positive out of it. It's a brilliant proposition.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so just thinking about in terms of sort of becoming data driven, because businesses, becoming data driven isn't always something that comes necessarily easily, is it? And we've all been involved in delivery of large scale transformation programs of some sort. There's going to be hurdles along the way, whether there's because data and technology alone won't necessarily make an organization successful. I think clearly there's cultural aspects, there's executive advocacy, the need to be agile and the ability to pivot in terms of some of these programs. In your and in our experience, how do organizations best become data driven? How do they approach what feels like quite a large challenge?
Yeah, wow, that's a good question. I think, and I'm pleased actually, Nick, you kind of talked about almost the people and the cultural and the organizational aspects of it. I think it's very easy to not pay them enough attention, because I think ultimately that's where the biggest challenges often are. I think in kind of our experience and my experience. But if we kind of break it down step by step, I think that the step number one is understanding your as is. Where as an organization are we now? What are the challenges we're facing? But also what are the business objectives and the customer objectives we're trying to get to?
Yeah.
I think this is rarely a data problem. It starts as a business or a customer problem. And I think it's unless you're very clear on what they are, it becomes quite easy to lose your way as you go through a change cycle or an implementation. Yeah. They've got to be the kind of the guiding star, if you like, the North Star of the change that happens. So understanding your as is and really getting clear on the problems that you're trying to solve. That's the first step, and sometimes easier said than done.
Yeah.
I think step number two then, I call it build a common vision. So Ben, you touched on some of the people, the organizational, the cultural challenges there. I think any large scale change is likely to fail unless all of the people involved in it buy into the common vision of where you're trying to get to. And that is not just about where you're trying to go, it's about really understanding why, and it's about understanding then what are the benefits for the customers and for the business in getting there, making that really, really, really compelling. Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely, and I mean, you're talking about the sort of an emerging data strategy, aren't you, really? And I guess we would always advocate that is part of a wider sort of business and technology strategy that, again, everybody's bought into. That those things can't work in isolation, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And being able to turn your understanding of the as is and that common vision into a data strategy, I think is absolutely what we're talking about here. I guess that's my next step, is actually being able to turn those things that you've defined then into a plan. For me, a strategy is a clear direction of travel and the plan to get there. The plan being not just what and how, but the people and the funding and the skills and all of those things that you need to execute on that vision. And I think your point there about it needs to fit as part of a broader technology strategy is bang on. But that technology strategy needs to be driven and powered by the business strategy and the customer strategy. So there's a whole kind of almost hierarchy of thinking to do here in order to get to the point where you've got, I guess, my final step, a plan that you can buy into and get on with executing. So I think the Endava experience, and my experience certainly, is that the technology aspects of this are an important part of it. Clearly what we do is a lot of technology delivery, but having the right people, both in the delivery teams with the right behaviors, with that agile mindset, and the support of the broader business are the things that will be the difference between success and failure, in my view.
Absolutely, and we often talk about delivery of aspects of that plan in terms of sort of bite-sized chunks, don't we? Demonstrating value, demonstrating it often, however small that is, and then bringing people on that journey feels less challenging when you're doing it in that sort of manageable bite-sized chunk approach.
Yeah, exactly. And the question we get asked a lot is, well, yeah, this is big, how do we start it?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I think breaking that down into bite-sized chunks, and demonstrating some delivery, and slowly, building momentum through smaller, positive steps where actually people start to see that change can happen and it can be done is really important. That obviously, we do a lot, Ben, in Endava around agile transformations, and getting that agile mindset and that willingness to adopt change through that kind of test and learn approach, I think is a massive win for insurers who've maybe been locked in slightly more kind of waterfall thinking.
Yeah, interesting. Brilliant. Okay, thanks. So, I mean, the topic of data-driven insurance, obviously very broad, very deep. But for anyone watching this podcast, if you're questioning whether now is the time to start thinking about becoming data-driven, I think what we would say is that realise you're not alone in undertaking that challenge. We speak to Gartner quite a lot, and I think they were predicting, I'll get the numbers slightly wrong, but by 2024, 75% of all organisations will have established a centralised data analytics centre of excellence to support their federated initiatives, and that means that everybody's trying to think about a lot of this stuff, and quite often we hear about the best approach to build momentum is through the sort of series of smaller wins, as you were describing, Dan. So I think our view would be sort of get started, build collaboration across the business, and demonstrate the business case for further investment by delivering some of those tangible benefits. And yeah, there's a contact us link, I think, on this podcast. So if anyone wants any more information about our current initiatives in this space, please get in touch. Dan, thank you for the insight you provided today, and thank you everybody for joining this brief chat on data-driven insurance. Not sure exactly when our next episode will be, but I think we're talking about digital self-service, so there'll be some more special guests along, I'm sure. Many thanks.